Hello everybody, this is Petra and this is the Nevelle Show. So today the topic would be the value of compassion. So Sundays we always have something spiritual or in terms of personal development, something in that nature. And since I'm not a spiritual teacher, I'm not going to claim to do anything spiritual, but sometimes it comes out of spiritual books, sometimes it just are personal insights or insights by other people. How I got to the topic today was I was reading Jamie Kern Lima's Believing It, which is about believing in yourself. And then I thought there were some interesting bits in there, and then I had read before A Guide to Miracles, and then I found the perfect topic. And I was just about to write down what I wanted to do about it, and then I thought, no, actually it'll just lead to another argument. And then I thought, why did I just think that? Why don't I feel the compulsion to use this anymore? It's completely vindicating me and everything. And then I thought about it some more and I realized it was compassion. Now, sometimes we need it and sometimes we need to give it. When we need it, something that came to mind just recently for me was, why is it that every time with the people that are closest to us, not necessarily in the vicinity or in the family, but people that are closest to us emotionally, when they're extraordinarily kind and open and super loving and bring joy to our lives, why is that the time when we lash out sometimes? I don't know if it has happened to you, but it certainly has happened to me that sometimes it happened just recently that I attributed something really kind and loving to somebody, and 5 minutes later I was just livid and I was angry and something really angry came out. And at those times, of course, you hope that the person isn't listening or, hearing it in some form spiritually or whatever. And I was wondering, why is that happening? Why now? Just after something so beautiful. And I realized that that is when the heart opens and when everything opens, and when everything opens, everything is open, which means things from the inside can come out, which may have been shoved down there because you didn't want them to be seen by anyone because they weren't particularly pretty. And I think that is a good explanation probably. And in those cases, you need to be kind to yourself as well and realize you aren't your patterns. You aren't your behaviors. If it came out to somebody in the physical world, you probably need to apologize, but it can happen. So compassion is something you need to be able to give yourself as well and accept from other people as well. But sometimes you always have to give it. You also have to give it. And sometimes that means you have to allow people to reject you, even if it's unfair or you haven't deserved it. Simply because they may go through the same exercise that you just went through and that I just explained. But sometimes it's also a way for them, or the only way that they see at the time, to protect their own certainty until they grow beyond it, or their life situation changes, or their culture around them changes. And sometimes compassion means that you allow them to attack you without attacking back. It's the capacity to accept both, much more than that even, without the resentment or the desire to hit back or again, or to justify yourself or protect your own integrity, certainty, or significance. That is kind of what came out of my fingers this morning when I was writing this. And I think it's kind of a beautiful thought. And how do you do this without becoming a victim in the second scenario where you are being attacked or rejected, or without losing face in the first scenario? Because a lot of times when we do this, when we start lashing out at people, then we think, why on earth did I just do this, and feel bad about ourselves? And then we need to attack them right again, because otherwise we lose face, right? Because there must have been a reason. It can't have been me, right? So it is understanding yourself and that you're not your patterns in the first bit. In the second scenario where somebody else rejects you or somebody else is attacking you for no reason, it is maybe understanding that people seldom judge you for who you actually are, what your actual faults are. That doesn't mean that your faults aren't there, but that's not what they see. They seldom see you. They see what they have in their own minds. They project their own faults onto you. They project their own culture's expectations onto you. And what do I mean by that? Well, an easy example for that is something that most women will probably easily understand. It used to be that you would show compassion to men by engaging in some innuendo, or so that they could let off some steam, which would then avoid them being actually angry at you. You have some sexual jokes or something, even at the workplace, and that would let off the steam, and then everybody would be happy and nothing would happen. Nowadays, of course, you can't do that anymore, but that is how you used to do it. Or you would pretend not to see a hard-on in a situation where it was inappropriate, or when you didn't like it, or both. Or you would be kind in letting them down when you weren't really interested. That was also something that would happen relatively frequently. Today, of course, you have to show compassion by allowing them to reject you viciously and vigorously quite often, even if you're not interested at all. Of course, sometimes you are interested, and in today's society, especially with political correctness, and then especially when it's a very moral society, it's a very hard thing to navigate. But a lot of times, we're just not interested, right? And I'm wearing a baggy t-shirt for a reason today. I can't tell you how many times it has happened to me that I walked in somewhere and some guy, especially Americans for some reason, Americans and Canadians would go, "I am married and I have a daughter." And I would go, "Okay, that's interesting, but I just wanted to get this transaction signed off." It happened to me one time. I wanted to go to my manager for a sign-off. And I'm just walking towards his office, and he can't see me approaching, but I can hear what he's saying on the phone. And I hear him saying to somebody else, and I think there was a whole group on the phone, because then I heard in the background some of our team, of the management team, actually talking. I heard the conversation. And he would shout, "I am not going to sleep with her. I've got a wife and children." And at that moment, I'm getting to the door. I couldn't just step back anymore. I just had this momentum already. So I'm approaching, I'm getting into his field of vision. He looks up and he gets bright red. And I see these red ears. I didn't say anything. I just kind of stared at him. But in my mind, I was going, who was offering? As if, if he makes the decision that I'm going to go along with it. I mean, I wasn't interested. I really wasn't. And that has happened so many times because I'm very, 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 very seldom interested. I think in my entire life, and I'm relatively old by now, I was actually sexually interested in maybe about 7 men. And I think only one of them I actually slept with, which was my first boyfriend. And that wasn't a spiritual experience. It was basically purely physical. But other than that, there were very, very, very few men that I was actually or am interested in. It's usually just one at a time, and it's very, very few. And it has nothing to do with them how they look. I used to live in Miami for a while, and there were some very, very good looking guys there. And it just doesn't do anything for me. It's not just muscles or something. Sometimes you have it nowadays that you've got some Zoom meeting or something, and somebody looks fiercely into the camera and says, "My wife is backstage." It happened the last time in some course somewhere. And you go to, you don't know if he's actually looking at you, right? It always looks as if they're looking at you because they're looking into the camera like I am right now, right? But, sometimes you think maybe that he was looking at you because you saw some reaction to something that you did. And I was just trying not to laugh because I was thinking, "Honey, you're 10 years younger than me. I'm not Mrs. Robinson, but I'm trying not to reject him back, so I'm kind of keeping this very steady face. And then I look to the chat and one of the women goes, "Hey, would like to see your wife." It was just so funny because, of course, it depends on the mindset you have, right? At the time, I still had a fully blue mindset, and that would mean to me, okay, that's off, you're married, you're completely off the table. I had kind of modified that a little bit, seeing the reality of things sometimes where people are simply just living as friends for 10 years already, right? And then people are really suffering if they are held to this. But I was still in the blue mindset. But of course, the orange mindset, here's something completely different, which I just realized because I've just kind of gotten into that space. Because the orange mindset, if somebody says I'm married and I've got a wife and children, just hears, okay, be careful that you don't show anybody that you're interested in me and come after hours when nobody sees you. That's kind of the orange mindset, right? So I'm kind of wondering now the entire time, were they hitting on me when they were saying this? Because they were more orange than blue, and I was very blue at the time. But anyway, so that's just but that's just something that women come across very often right now, and of course they know that it's not them most of the time. So when I went to to the office of that guy, I was wearing just normal office clothes. So I was kind of looking down on me. Okay, did the blouse pop open? No, blouse is still closed. Okay, what did he see? I didn't do any dance moves or anything. My hair just normal. I've got a ponytail. Okay, I'm wearing a skirt. Maybe he likes legs. Well, that may be it. And he probably got excited and then he just projected that onto me. And that's kind of a normal thing that you realize nowadays. If they are really upset and they are really rejecting you, it's usually that they are thinking about sex, so they assume that you're thinking about sex too, which you may not be at all, and I usually am not. But anyway, so the problem is it happens in other contexts too, where it's less obvious, right? Especially when people make moral judgments about your character, it can be very hard to dismiss if you're not aware of that fact that they may actually not see you at all, but they may just project their own desires or their own faults onto you. And I used to automatically go into this pattern if this would happen, if they would accuse me, that part of me would automatically think, no matter what they would say, no matter how out there it was, they think badly about me, so I must be a bad person. That was automatic. And another part of me would get really angry and say, it's wrong, it's completely unfair, this is not true. And then I'd start defending myself outwardly, but also inwardly, because there was this conflict between the two parts of me. And of course, if you have a conflict within you, then to the outside, they see the conflict. So it would be looking as if I was lying. And I wasn't lying. There was just this conflict inside, right? And then they would accuse me of lying and not believe me. And I would get even more and more angry. But even if the conflict hadn't been there, a lot of times they wouldn't have listened. It didn't matter what was the truth. They were accusing me in order to defend their own certainty. And they were meeting a need with that, which means they weren't ready to listen to me. And I know that because I used to be like that. I used to, especially in that kind of context, I can remember, and I was wondering why this was happening to me, and I was thinking about karma, and karmic consequences and everything. And I used to grow up in this very, very strict church group, which was basically a shoot-off of the American Bible Belt Church around here. There is one that is about 10 kilometers from here. And we used to go there all the time. And it was a very fundamentalistic church. I mean, some of them still, even to this day, I believe, think that the earth is 5,000 years old. And I don't think they think it's flat, but they do think that the earth is 5,000 years old and that there is no such thing as, evolution or something. So it was a very, very fundamentalistic church. So I do understand this mindset. And at the time, somebody discussed kind of the same things that I have been accused of in recent years with me. And I didn't hear anything. I didn't want to hear anything. I can still remember that one discussion at some festival somewhere. And she was actually shouting at me saying, listen to me, you're not listening to me, you're not hearing anything I say. And even though she was saying this, it was actually coming through at that point, although I think I had quite a few glasses of wine at that point. It was actually coming through, but I shut it off immediately. And why did I shut it off? Because it was affecting my certainty into my belief. I had a certain belief about the situation, and it had to be this, and I couldn't let anything else in. And I realize now that is happening to other people as well. But because of that inner conflict, I felt this compulsion to always try to defend myself. And of course, if you defend yourself, then people will, you start attacking them, and they will then go even further into their belief and defend it more fervently. And it just doesn't, it's not healing. It's not helping anything. It's not helping the truth or anything. And I just wondered, why did it change suddenly that I don't have this compulsion anymore? And I used to, it's not necessarily a mind thing, because everybody who has gone through different cultures and has lived in different cultures knows that cultural perceptions will differ. So no matter what you do, what you say, in one culture, it will be perceived as great, as the truth, and everybody's going to agree with you. You go to a different culture and they think you're a horrible person. And everybody will think that, and they will all agree within their little subculture. And some subcultures are cross-cultural, so there are different countries in that subculture, but they all believe the same thing, and they're all on the same page. So you must be wrong, and everybody's going to believe that. But then you go to a different subculture again, and everybody's going to tell you that you're right. Everybody's going next subculture. Everybody's going to celebrate you. You know, it's a very bizarre thing to see, and that's the first time when you see it. But still, if you're being attacked, it still doesn't necessarily help you to understand that in your head. And I think when I really understood this was in the beginning of December last year, because I did my own little date with destiny. I couldn't do the normal date with destiny because I didn't know what my financial situation was going to be. I had wanted to talk to somebody in the beginning of November, but unfortunately that went into a completely different direction. So I didn't know which direction to go on, and then some other things delayed themselves as well. So I simply couldn't take that risk. So, but I thought, okay, I'm not going to miss out on this experience. I'm still going to do that. And I've bought so many different courses by him that I have plenty of videos to look and to watch. And sometimes that's actually a better thing if I watch the old videos, because then nobody's trying to mess with what they're showing me, which may or may not be, biased by certain perceptions. So I actually, it's more like Holy Spirit can come through, unimpeded in a way. And it was a beautiful experience. It was probably one of the best Date with Destinies I'd had. And all the videos that I was watching in that particular program were actually from Date with Destiny. So I've gone to Date with Destiny several times before. So I know what the exercises are, and I could follow the different steps. And I was, looking into the question, and I was looking into the different bits that usually come in that program. And one of the things was that I will never again allow anybody to define my character for me or fall victim to other people's perception about me. I will take feedback. I will think about whether it is right or wrong, but I will not allow them to make a character judgment about me. That's not for them to make. That may be for God to make, and that's for me to make. It's not for them to make. And that has had a very profound effect, because it also freed me up. Because when people were attacking me, I didn't have to attack them back anymore. I don't have to attack them back anymore. I can see that half of the time if people accuse me, it's their own thoughts, their own memes, their own stories, their own cultural perceptions, which also means I don't have to attack them back. And so sometimes I will still try to explain something when I see that there is suffering involved and I don't want them to suffer, and I see that there is maybe an error in thinking there. But if I see that, I'm not getting anywhere, I'm just leaving it be. Maybe I'm not the right teacher for them. Certainly most people will think that I'm not the right teacher for them, so I will let somebody else teach them. And if they don't want to be taught, they may have to go through the same thing I went through in life in order to get to that realization, which I don't wish them. So maybe they want to listen to another teacher. But there is nothing won by fighting with their reality. And at the same time, it's incredibly helpful to understand that it really has little or nothing to do with you. And it took me a very long time to learn that. But if you don't engage, and that is also a spiritual teaching, if you don't engage when somebody attacks you, then your integrity remains intact. You're free to be compassionate and keep loving without feeling like a victim, because your integrity is still attacked. And that is how you don't defend yourself without being a victim. And then you don't have to exclude people either, because ultimately that's a bad idea. And it's against the whole idea of oneness. I can't say I'm completely there yet. Sometimes I will avoid people still because they trigger me and they are trying to guilt me into things, and I don't want to be triggered, but I'm getting there. I've gotten a lot better with it lately. That I don't write about it right away or do something about it right away. And that's a great freeing thing to learn. The challenge is always to remember it and apply it. But I wanted to pass that on. Maybe it helps you if you have had this issue before. I find this new mindset very helpful. So again, I see you tomorrow again. So until then, live strong and prosper. Let me see.